Iraq, Thailand was a long way from Lawton, Oklahoma, where I'd grown up on a small farm 10 miles out of town. Growing up, I'd ride in the back of Dad's pickup every Saturday, headed to the cattle feed store in town, and along the way, we would pass Lawton Field, where I'd see Army helicopters and sometimes other aircraft take off and land. My only thoughts were, someday I'm going to leave Lawton, just like these planes. Farming wasn't for me, and every day I just think I'm going to leave here when I finish school. Nobody in my family had gone to college, and I couldn't think of nothing I really wanted to be other than out of Lawton. Well, I got out of there all right, and in October 1968, I arrived at Karat Air Force Base, Thailand, as an aircraft radio repairman. Seems I was brighter than I had known. Maybe it was because of my reading. I was so fascinated by books. They always took me someplace other than Lawton. I worked mostly on the flight line repairing the radio systems on F-105 fighter bombers. F-4 fighter bombers began to be stationed there shortly after my arrival. It was a good time, a nice life, and then I was sent TDY to Saigon, Thompson Nut, during a surge in flight operations there, and they needed some backfills. Saigon was like another universe compared to Karat. But they both were Wild West for young servicemen with money in their pockets. Charles Dickens, the English author, must have had a premonition about the Vietnam War, about Karat, Udorn, Saigon, and Pechonburi Road in Bangkok when he wrote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." Charles Dickens.
Well, we're going to talk about the Officers Club at Udorn, Thailand, but I want to start back when I was a Raven in most of 1969. Get down to Udorn maybe once or twice a month, drop off an airplane, get to spend a couple of nights there. And so you go by the Officers Club and have a drink or two or three or four and go downtown. But things had really changed when I came back from my second tour flying the RF-4 in April 72 to April 73. And part of that was there was the wing there at Udorn was a standard wing, 3 squadrons. One, in this case, one RF-4 squadron and 2 F-4 squadrons. But in May, the big deal with the Vietnamese and planning and execution of this bombing campaign up in North Vietnam, the wing acquired 2 TDY squadrons, F-4 squadrons, and then at sometimes 3 squadrons. So the wing had 6 squadrons there. Well, this means one hell of a lot of officers, and the officers club was jammed all the time. It was open 24 hours a day. And then there was another group of people who arrived, and south of Udorn, a runway, a 10,000-foot runway had been built because McNamara was planning on putting before all this stuff, was planning on having F-111s stationed there. Well, that never happened. T-28 pilot school was on the Air America ramp. There was the attachment of the 56 Special Operations Wing there, and that's where our records were kept. And so in case we got killed, we died in Thailand. But the students would do 6 months in the T-28, and then they'd go off into combat. But they'd go down and do much of their touch and goes down at this airfield down there. Well, 1972 shows up, all this stuff, and then, of course, the Marines have got to get involved in this stuff. So they send their equivalent of a wing to this ox field, I'll call it that. And so those guys, and they're living in tents out in the boondocks there, which can't be fun because there's cobras everywhere, as you well know. So they would show up at the officers club. And at one point during all this other stuff, there was some guy, I don't remember who it was, but he convinced these Marines who were getting completely drunk at the bar that they had to take off their clothes and run around naked through the officers club. And they did. Whatever. So anyway, so there was just a huge amount of people in the club coming there, and for reasons that totally escape me. Angel was the club officer. They had these sort of events to try to get people to come to the club. Well, trying to get people to the club wasn't a problem, man. I mean, everybody went and ate downtown on occasion, but you did much of your eating at the officers club because especially the air crews, because you're right across this little street from the officers club. It was interesting that these events. The only one I remember was they set up a boxing routine out in the back of the club outside, so you could sit there if you wanted to and watch people box. Who cares, man? Everybody goes to the bar. Anyway, I did, in the RF-4 squadron, I was a scheduler, and I usually got done by 5 in the afternoon from doing that stuff. And there was a navigator, because if the navigator knows the bad pilots, the pilot knows the bad nav, so you don't put them together, otherwise they kill themselves. So I went over there to the O Club about probably 5 in the afternoon, and this is the early fall of '72. You walk up, and here's all these guys with these boxes and stuff, and they've got all these frogs in them. And you're going, what the hell is this? And they said, oh, we're going to have a frog jumping contest. What? And then a couple of ravens had shown up, and they had these pretty good-sized boxes. And these are the sort of things that food used to get sent up to you for you to cook. They must have had 400 or 500 frogs in this box, and a huge amount. So anyway, frog jumping in the bar. Well, it's dark in there, it's not pitch black, but it's pretty dark. So I didn't know what was going on. I walk in the bar, and you don't have to get in there very far before you feel that you hear this squish. You're stepping on frogs. I I wandered over to the bar, and there's this guy who come really, really drunk. And he's sitting there at the bar, the Thai bartender's on the other side of it. And these occasional frog would come skipping down the bar. This guy would grab one of the frogs, stick it in his mouth, and bite the head off. And he'd chew on it, for a second and then spit it out. And he'd obviously done this 3 or 4 times. And I heard him say, "I thought these are supposed to be good to eat. It tastes like crap." And you're going, "Oh man." And the Thai bartender was so grossed out, he just, kind of put his hands up and turned away. At the same time I was there's some guy turned around and either picked up a small, a office trash can or a small box. He put 30 or 40 frogs in that thing, and he went into the women's restroom, and there's this woman sitting on a toilet doing her stuff, and he takes the box and dumps it over the top of the stall and covers her with frogs. And of course she screams and runs in circles. And that was about the time I figured, well, I guess that's enough for the night for me. I'm going to go over to my room and clean up a little bit, and then I'm going to go downtown for eating. In 1970, I was a FAC instructor at Hurlburt Field in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And the Ravens have been put on a list of people to get rid of. How dare you challenge authority? In the fall of 1970, the quarterly Flying Safety magazine came out, and the flight surgeon for the Airlift Command had written this thing: the Air Force is starting this campaign to get pilots to stop drinking so much. And if you want to sell something, you got to be credible. This flight surgeon was, going through his spiel, and then he writes, if you've been intoxicated more than 3 times this year, you've got a drinking problem. And of course, everybody there in Fort Walton Beach, the bars were open. It's run by the mafia. The bars are open 24 hours a day. And somebody read this article and said, "He means 3 times this week, doesn't he?" There was a real campaign in the Air Force to cut that out. And when I think what probably cut down on this a lot is when the F-16 was introduced. That thing could pull G's and accelerate and climb at the same time. You cannot have a hangover and do that. There at Udorn, there were several incidents of F-4 pilots certainly being so drunk, well, they killed themselves. With the Ravens, we were flying, there's a limit of 110 hours a month of flying in the Air Force. When I was a Raven, we had this big offensive going on. We were flying 170 hours a month. The Air Force took that off our records, but nonetheless, and you can't be drunk and fly that much. A typical fighter pilot's maybe flying 30, maybe 30 hours a month, 35, no big deal. A quick story, every squadron had their barmaid. That wasn't really true, but anyway, ours was this woman named Nan. And of course, by 74, it was very clear to all the Thai employees that the Air Force was going to close down the place and exit. So Nan, not being a fool, seduces this first lieutenant F-4 pilot, academy graduate, which right away tells you something. And they got married in Thailand. They go back to Boston to meet his family. I don't know how that went, but So he had been assigned to Homestead Air Force Base, which is on the south side of Miami. It's long since closed. So they're driving down I-95 down the East Coast. As they pass into South Carolina, she says, "Oh, we have to stop by Shaw Air Force Base. So I see my Vecchi friends." That's where the reconnaissance stuff was stationed at the time, in Sumter, South Carolina. And so they go there. And I was told all this stuff later. she goes walking into the officers club at 5 o'clock on a Friday night. And I was told there had to be 30 guys crawling under tables to get out of her eyesight. And because who knows what they've been doing with her, and their wives are sitting next to them. So a guy I knew lived on base, and he was really pissed nobody warned her that she was on base. 8 o'clock on Saturday morning the next day, his doorbell rings, and he opens the door, and there's Nan. "Oh, I have stopped by see my friend Jelly." So she walks in with her husband, and this friend of mine says, "You have no idea what it's like to listen to this woman jabber away for half an hour, and your wife is sitting there watching you with his death stare, waiting for one mistake." He said, "You smile and nod, and the back of your head's pouring sweat." So anyway, that's that.
Viewers, thank you for watching, and as you know, I always recommend books or articles for further reading for the subjects I am talking about. Lieutenant Colonel Angel Pilato, United States Air Force, retired, was the very first female military club manager in Southeast Asia, and maybe in the entire U.S. Air Force. She was the Officers Club manager at the Udorn Thaiani Royal Thai Air Force Base, and she does have some amazing stories to tell. She wrote a book, which you can find on Amazon, called Angel's Truck Stop, which includes so many stories from her time as club manager. I have a copy. It is great reading. Marty Cavato, a former Air Force pilot with the Triple Nickel Squadron, wrote concerning the book.
As a young fighter pilot at Udorn Royal Thai Air Force Base in 1971 and 72, Angel's Truck Stop, the Officers Club, was a source of solace and comfort. I ate there, drank there, laughed there, cried there, slept there, and sometimes even fought there. This book brings back many memories, some harsh, some comforting, but welcome just the same.
I get no money, no royalties from the books and articles I recommend. I just do it as a service because it's what I read. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and stand by, please, for more coming your way.